everybody. Well, here we are, Friday, March the 8th, 2013, and we're just a few days away from filling out our brackets for the NCAA men's basketball tournament. 68 teams, one dream. That's right, to try to become national basketball champion. But in order to have a shot at the dream, you have to be able to play in the tournament. And of course, we already know whom most of those teams will be. But there are some teams whom we don't really know. Some of those teams, of course, as far as if they'll be playing in that actual tournament, well, their fate's going to be determined by how they play between now and March the 17th. In other words, how they play in their regular season finales and how they'll play in their particular conference tournaments. What we're going to do is break down the bubble teams in the major conferences. We're not going to talk about the non-major leagues, just the 6 major conferences. That's the Big 12, the Big East, the Big 10, Pac-12, SEC, and ACC. We're going to begin with the Big 12 first, and of course we already know who 3 of the locks are to get into the NCAA tournament: Kansas, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State. As a matter of fact, Kansas, the way they're playing right now, they could very well get a #1 seed. And if that happens, then they would get the #1 seed in the South region, which means they'd be playing the sub-region, in other words, the round of 64 and round of 32 in Kansas City, and be playing the regional semifinals and finals the following weekend at Cowboy Stadium in Arlington. That would be a dream scenario for the Jayhawks, not only to be a #1 seed, but also to not have to travel very far to both venues. That'd make it very accessible for their fan base, and they'd be able to buy a lot of tickets and have an enormous crowd support for all those games. This year, of course, the Final Four takes place at the Georgetown in Atlanta, but prior to that, Kansas will be able to take a ton of their fans to Kansas City and to Dallas. And of course, remember, the Big 12 tournament takes place the following week from now in Kansas City. So Kansas would be able to really have those arenas for the next few weeks occupied with a lot of blue. Kansas State, in the meantime, looks like they are in line for a #2 or #3 seed for the NCAA tournament, the way things are looking right now. And they could very well be playing a sub-regional for the NCAA tourney in Kansas City as well, because of the way the pod system is set up. They would just be set up in a different geographical region, though, than Kansas. And as far as Oklahoma State, the Cowboys, probably going to be a 4 or a 5 seed, just depending on how they play as far as the NCAA tournament goes. Now, in terms of the Oklahoma Sooners, even though they're not a lock for the NCAA tournament, they're pretty darn close to it. Right now, they're at 20 wins overall, 11-6 in league play. And so long as they take care of business against TCU in Fort Worth on March the 9th, I think that they'll have it wrapped up. Otherwise, an upset loss, and they would need, in my opinion, a win, at least one win in the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City coming up next week in order to solidify a spot. Otherwise, a loss against TCU culminated with the loss in the Big 12 tournament, and they're going to make things a little anxious on themselves come Selection Sunday. Remember, OU's not ranked, but what helps them is the fact that they are have one of the best strength of schedules in the country and have an RPI in the top 30 and do have wins over Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Ohio. A lot of quality wins right there for Lon Kruger's squad. Iowa State, I think, was on the bubble. Right now, I think they're on the right side of the bubble thanks to that win over Oklahoma State on March the 6th. They need to win at West Virginia to close out the regular season to really feel good about themselves entering the Big 12 tournament. It looks like Iowa State's locked into that looks like the #5 seed, and would more than likely play Oklahoma in the quarterfinals. And I tell you, the winner of that quarterfinal game really has to feel good about their NCAA tournament chances. Otherwise, just depending upon upsets in other conference tournaments nationwide, you just never know what that NCAA tournament committee is going to do on March the 17th as far as those at-large bids. So, need to really take care of business this weekend, and also, too, at least the quarterfinal round of the Big 12, and that way you're not sweating bullets come March 17th. And that's pretty much how the Big 12 looks as far as the NCAA tournament. Baylor's played themselves out. They're in basically slump city. They would have to win the Big 12 tournament in order to go to the NCAA. They're not going to get in that large. Looking at the Big 10, best conference this year in college basketball: Indiana, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin. 5 shoe-ins for the NCAA tournament. Indiana, as a matter of fact, has a legitimate shot at a #1 seed. They'll get it if they win the Big Ten tournament. As a matter of fact, this year, the Midwest regional semifinal and final takes place in Indianapolis. And boy, you talk about a home crowd advantage, that would be one right there for the Hoosiers. As far as teams on the bubble, really, in my opinion, there are 3 from that conference, but I think 2 of them are going to get in just based upon their resume and strength of schedule. Minnesota, I think, is going to get in, even though they may not have clinched yet. The Golden Gophers, right now, strength of schedule, #2 in the country, RPIs in the top 20, and plus they have a 20-10 record. They beat Indiana just recently when the Hoosiers were #1 in the country. They've had quality wins this year. What hurts them is that they're 8-9 in the Big Ten. But being 8-9 in this league, there's no shame in that just because of the high quality of play. I think the committee overlooks that, and they will look at the strength of schedule and the quality wins that the Golden Gophers have. Same thing with Illinois. I think the Fighting Illini, despite an 8-9 conference record, I think they get in as well. Strength of schedule is impressive too at 7, and Illinois this year beat Gonzaga, who is currently #1 in the country. So I think Illinois and Minnesota, I think those teams have very little to worry about, even if they don't close out their regular seasons with wins. And then Iowa, truly a bubble team right now. They are 8-9 as well. They do have some things to worry about with an RPI that's pretty bad at 78, strength of schedule at 114, but they have quality wins on their resume too. They will probably need to make a pretty deep push, at least the Big Ten semifinal tournament showing, in order to impress the NCAA tournament. I think anything less than the Final Four in the Big Ten tournament jeopardizes their hopes of getting into the NCAA tournament. But I think at least 7 get in from the Big Ten. Looking at the Big East, Georgetown, Louisville, Marquette, Notre Dame, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, all 6 I think get in. I think Villanova may not have clinched just yet, but I think the win against Georgetown just recently really puts a feather in their cap. Villanova has scheduled tough this year. Strength of schedule is 17. Only 19 wins on the schedule, but the win over Georgetown recently helps a lot. The strength of schedule helps big time. And I think as long as they don't go out early in the Big East tournament, remember the Big East tournament has a lot of rounds. There's 16 teams total in that conference. I think Nova, will get the benefit of the doubt. Cincinnati, few weeks ago, I would have told you that the Bearcats were in the NCAA, but they've lost 6 of their last 8 games, including a loss to Providence, who's trying to get into the tournament. The RPI for Cincinnati is okay. Strength of schedule is not too bad as well, but 8-9 in the league doesn't stick out. And again, NCAA committee looks at how you've played lately, and this is where the Bearcats are going to get bit in the butt, in my opinion. They're slumping. So they might have to make a deep push into the Big East tournament in order to solidify an at-large bid. And Providence, the Friars have played better. Right now, they're actually ahead of Cincinnati in the league at 9-8. What will hurt them, though, is a bad RPI at 79. Strength of schedule is mediocre at 68. But they did beat Cincinnati just recently. The Friars, if they go out early in the Big East tournament, I think that puts them in the NIT. But the Friars are playing much better ball right now than Cincinnati. So that's one thing that they have going for them. But again, their resume on the whole isn't as good as Cincinnati's. So I think Big East is going to get 7 if you count Nova. And Cincinnati and Providence, well, who the heck knows what's going to happen with those 2 teams. It's up to them. Looking at the Pac-12, 2 for sure, Arizona and UCLA, both shoe-ins. Colorado, I don't know why they're not included already. From everything I've seen from all the publications, they're not in yet, but they've got 20 wins on the schedule. Strength of schedule, 19, RPI 29, and on March the 7th, just recently, blew Oregon out, the Pac-12 leaders, by more than 20 points at home. Colorado's 20-9, 10-7 in the league. I think the Buffs are going to get in. The Oregon Ducks are at 23-7, 12-5 in the league, but they haven't clinched anything yet, in my opinion, because their strength of schedule is horrible at 124. And we've seen recently, I can't remember which Pac-12 team it was, but in recent years where a Pac-12 team won the regular season and didn't get into the NCAA tournament. Could it happen again this time with Oregon? We'll have to wait and see. The Ducks need to win at Utah this weekend. to alleviate some doubt right there and not have it come down to the Pac-12 tournament. Again, Oregon has a good record, both in and out of conference, but their strength of schedule is pathetic. Cal, right now, playing good ball. They're at 20-10. They've beaten some good teams, but they also lost at home earlier this year to a bad Stanford team. So I think Mike Montgomery's team right now might have a little bit of work to do despite that 20-10 record. Strength of schedule is pretty good at 37. 12-6 right now is Cal in the league. So if I had to say one way or another, I would probably think that Cal's going to get in, but they can ill afford to get upset early in the Pac-12 tourney. And then looking at Arizona State, their stock has gone way down despite sweeping Colorado this year and beating UCLA. I still think that Arizona State's going to have to win against Arizona this weekend and make a pretty deep run into the Pac-12 tournament. It's going to be pretty tough, on the other hand, for the Sun Devils to get into the NCAA's horrible strength of schedule at 134. RPI is just outside the top 90. Arizona State needs quality wins coming up these next few days to have any shot at all. And then looking at the ACC, Duke, UNC, Miami, NC State, all shoe-ins. Duke trying to nail down a #1 seed, and I think they'll get it if they can take care of business these next few days, including winning the ACC. Virginia, they're pretty much borderline right now. They're trying to get an at-large bid. They've got 20 wins, winning record in the ACC at 10-7. They're really hurt, though, by a bad RPI and a horrible strength of schedule. A victory this weekend over Maryland would really help their cause out and give them some momentum heading into the ACC tournament. Speaking of Maryland, they're another bubble team as well, whom, just like Virginia, has 20 wins as well. But they're a couple of games worse than Virginia in the ACC standings at 8-9. Their RPI is worse than Virginia's, and the strength of schedule is just as bad. But this game, the game coming up this weekend against the Cavaliers for Maryland is enormous. A win right there against Virginia, and they'll have some momentum. I think Maryland and Virginia need strong showings in the ACC to make an impression for the NCAA committee. And it could really be one of those teams right there that will make it 5 teams for the ACC in the NCAAs. And then finally, the SEC. I don't think they're going to get too many teams in the tournament this year. This has not been a strong basketball league lately. Even though I know Kentucky won the whole thing a year ago, it still wasn't a strong league on the whole. Florida is the only team that's the solidifiable one right now. The Gators, we know are going to be there. Missouri, I would say if I were to bet my life right now, they are definitely going to get there. With an RPI of 28, 11-6 overall, 22 wins is going to be hard to ignore. Kentucky is the true wild card in this one. It helps that they're a big name and that they won the national title. What hurts them, they've had some bad losses, losing at home to A&M, the loss at Arkansas just recently, and then the inexplicable loss lately, just recently at Georgia. So Kentucky needs a win to close out the regular season at home against Florida. If they don't win against Florida, they might just have to get to the SEC championship game in the SEC tournament, might have to win it to feel like they're going to get to the NCAA tournament. Otherwise, they're going to leave it into the hands of the committee. And with that RPI at 53 and strength of schedule at 76, that's not going to be good for Calipari's squad. And Tennessee helps them as their strength of schedule is at 48. They've had quality wins this year. They defeated Florida, but they also lost to Georgia earlier in the year. Tennessee is hurt by the fact that they only have 18 victories. They need to beat Missouri on March the 9th to close out the regular season and a good SEC tournament showing. And then you look at Ole Miss, the Rebels, at 22-8, 11-6 in the SEC. Normally, records like that would get you into the NCAA tournament, but strength of schedule is bad. And losing to Mississippi State earlier this year is even worse. So strength of schedule at 162. Mississippi right now really has to be thinking about the SEC tournament and finding a way to do very well in it, because their strength of schedule is going to hold them back despite the 22 wins. And Alabama and Arkansas, they do have quality wins this year, but they occurred at home, not on the road. And that's what's really going to hurt them. And just like for Ole Miss, a deep push into the SEC tournament will be the only thing that can get them into the NCAAs. Anything less, and they're looking at the NIT. So that's my look at bubble teams as far as the major conferences in college basketball.